Hey everybody, welcome, welcome. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to let you know that next week we will be having our 1 year anniversary episode. I'm going to hop on with Jeff and we are going to be sharing all of our lessons that we've learned from a year of committing to delivering weekly podcasts to you, my love. So I would love to celebrate with you. What I'd love to do is I'd like to create an audio collage of sorts where you share your name and your business and you let me know how long you've been listening and how this little podcast has impacted you. If you'd like to be part of this audio collage that we will share in next week's podcast anniversary, head over to speakpipe.com /the savvy luminary and share how this podcast has impacted you. Aloha! Welcome to the Savvy Luminary, an astrology podcast for entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Leslie Tagorda, an Aquarius boss woman, a brand designer, and business astrologer. I help visionary spiritual entrepreneurs and impact makers just like you reach your highest potential and become the luminaries you are star charted to be. So, hey everyone, how are you doing? Oh my gosh. To be honest, it's been a little bit rough here, rough around the edges. I'm still very low energy. All of this wonderful Aquarius energy. I do love Aquarian energy and I do get very excited by it because I have my sun and my Jupiter in Aquarius in the ninth house. And, we're talking about this Mercury retrograde, but oh my goodness, like just not being able to find my words, my thoughts haven't been clear. I have all of these things that I want to say, but there's just like, I can't seem to find the words or the expressions to say what I need to say. So, what we're going to do today, we're going to make this nice and short and sweet. So what I want to talk about in today's episode is I want to talk more about this Aquarius Stellium. We have the sun and Mercury and Venus and Jupiter and Saturn all in Aquarius right now. And then right around February 10th, we're going to have the moon in Aquarius. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about this kind of midway point in the Mercury retrograde. And of course, I'm going to want to talk about why, if you're anything like me, you are still not feeling it, right? Just like full well into 2021. And you know what? Don't be alarmed. I feel, when I'm talking to clients, I've had a bunch of astrobrand readings and I can feel this kind of like this uncertainty, this muddiness. And I was actually reading an article earlier today on Vox, this website that I enjoy reading articles there and talking about just the weight of this pandemic going on almost a year with lockdowns. It's really interesting how the year of this podcast is totally aligned with the year of the pandemic. And, in the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know it was happening. We still had all of our energy. And now that we have been holding this space and holding on to everything and just trying to keep everything together, regardless if you've, just lost your freedom or terribly, and I'm sorry if this has happened to you, if you've lost people in your lives, all of us are grieving, right? And so it's really hard to move forward when we just don't know what's up front, right? Anyway, so I wanted to also talk about new moon in Aquarius because that's where where things start to expand. After the new moon in Aquarius, we get, during the new moon in Aquarius, we get a chance to plant our seeds about the future, right? You're going to have had a chance to rethink. Some clarity is going to have come through. Even if you're not clear, it's okay. After the new moon in Aquarius, things start to feel more expansive again. And then after our Mercury retrograde finishes at the end of February, again, things start to open up. So I feel like we are right at that darkest spot right before the dawn. So today I'm going to be talking about all of this, talking about the new moon in Aquarius and how you can work with it in your business, like what seeds you need to plant. And I'm going to also be talking about the astrology of the week. So I've been honoring my inability to actually get any work done right now. I'm still committing to these weekly podcasts, and just over the last few weeks, it's been really hard. Let's just say, I'm still showing up, but it's been really hard to focus on what I want to say and putting my notes together. And I know that Jeff has been feeling the grind too. And so this last week, I've been really honoring my energy and thinking that, oh, instead of hustling and trying to do things, well, let's just take care of things for me. And so it's right before, this podcast anniversary, but podcast anniversary, if you've been listening from the beginning, you know that I started this podcast on February 14th, my solar return. So I have a birthday coming up, and I was like, well, I better go check in with all of my doctor's appointments. And sure enough, I was behind on my checkups and all these things. So over the last few days, I've just been going to the doctors, taking blood tests, getting all of my screenings, and just wellness things. I live in San Francisco, and I go to the UCSF, the Women's Center, and every day over the last week, I've been walking into the doors for another test or another, and I'm greeted by this beautiful quote by Maya Angelou. And her quote that is, everywhere at UCSF, it says, be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. I thought that was so beautiful. And it really did plant a little rainbow in my heart because I've been feeling really heavy just energetically, right? And so I went online to do a little bit of research about Maya Angelou. Of course, we know that she's a wonderful, like multifaceted, talented Black artist, poet, film director. I mean, her accolades just go on and on and on. And I found on Oprah.com, and I actually listed this in the show notes if you want to take a look or just Google it, and her quote, be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. She shares a little tip of the inspiration that really brought this quote forward. And to her, she was inspired with this little quote from an African American song that she heard as a little girl, basically talking about things like preparing yourself to be a glimmer of hope when things seem so dark, right? And she wants to push that envelope further and saying, preparing to make the change, be the change for people who don't look like you, who may not have the same beliefs as you, who may not share the same love of food or language or, any of those things. So this idea of like diversity, reaching out to people that are different from you, and yet still being a blessing to someone outside of your normal scope, right? And so if you love, astrological archetypes like I do, the things that come out in that quote and what she was talking about, preparing to be the change and being a rainbow and all this like talking about diversity and talking about inclusion and talking about the future and change, I was like, oh my gosh, that's totally all this Aquarian energy, all this Sagittarius energy, right? And so to me, when we are in the midst of this Aquarius stellium, right? This pileup of Aquarius energy that I want to talk a little bit more about, this is really us, looking at, because we're talking about our business and how to use astrology in our business. This is our season to celebrate a vision of diversity and to celebrate and to understand how we are a blessing to someone else through our business. Okay. So please take a look at Dr. Maya Angelou's quote, be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. And that today is going to inspire us for our mantra for today's episode. Because today we are going to be talking about Aquarius and our new moon and all this Mercury retrograde. And I've been talking all about the future and social values and all of these things. So how do we bring this all together? So today's mantra, again, inspired by Dr. Maya Angelou. If you could plant your feet firmly in the ground and take a nice, beautiful, clearing breath. Feel your spine elongate. I speak my social values through my brand to call in my soul communities. That's our mantra. Please repeat that after me. Take a deep clearing breath. I speak my social values through my brand to call in my soul communities. Yes. So we are in the second week of our Mercury retrograde, meaning that, yay, it's halfway over. But meaning like, oh my gosh, like how many mistakes could I have sent in my emails? How many mistakes that I made with communications? How many mistakes have I made trying to find the right words? Oh my goodness. So last week when I had my Mercury retrograde masterclass, I was talking with everybody about your social values. Now, social values are really important in a brand because it allows you to connect with your soul communities, right? Because there's this aspect of like social values that things could be like diversity, inclusion, social justice, truth. Like those are kind of a snapshot of some of the social values. For me, my other social values that I love are also education, because I feel privileged to be educated. So I want to pass on that kind of education to others. So I often donate money to girls and women's education organizations because those are really important things for me. Now, I could do better on expressing my social values. I have, just a little mention of it on my website. And I do need to revisit that during this Mercury retrograde to rethink how can I express that even more. So same with you in your business, understanding your social values, how you got to those social values, and what can you do through your business to promote those social values. And so, how this works in our business, especially when we're expressing our social values, is that these are just kind of the little gateways that get into the minds and the hearts of our soul customers. Somebody might run across me and they might say, "Oh, look at Leslie. Look at all of the websites that are that she's designed that are really based in diversity and inclusion." That's one of our social values. We do a lot of websites for nonprofit organizations, and we also do a lot of projects for LGBTQI organizations. Like not for whatever reason, like I'm saying for whatever reason, but it's not for whatever reason. I've been very clear that we value diversity, we value inclusion, we value social justice. And so, of course, these organizations come to me. And so these are how these things work, especially when we're looking at these Aquarian values in our business. So, whatever your shared social values are, to make sure that you're expressing them and being really intentional about how you're using them. And then watch how your soul communities start flocking to you because you've been really intentional about talking about your social values through your brand. Now, what if there are people that don't believe in your social values? Well, to me, the obvious insight there is that, yeah, you lose clients or you lose particular customers that don't believe in those social values. Now, my question is that really a loss? Right? Because we're not here to please everybody. And I think in this Aquarian age, we can really find and connect with the people that we are meant to when we take a stand for what we believe. I'm switching it up in today's episode by presenting a user question at the beginning. And I really wanted to answer this question because I think that everybody can relate with Sarah. I talked earlier about kind of the grief that we're feeling, and we are all feeling this, and some of us are feeling it much more than others.
Hey Leslie, this is Sarah. My question for you is about how to use the new moon intentionally to get a restart for this time of year. I've been feeling kind of stuck in both my business and mental health these days, and been hearing that the new moon could be a powerful one to start some new cycles for this year, and want to do what I can to put that in motion. So anything you have to advise, I would appreciate. Thank you.
Sarah, I just want to let you know that I hear you and I acknowledge how you're feeling. When I look at your chart for the here and now, what I see in terms of just this idea of like mental health and kind of feeling really stuck is that you have this aspect right now, this kind of long-term aspect with with transiting Pluto, which is today currently at 25 degrees of Capricorn. And in your natal chart, it is squaring off with your natal moon as well as your natal Pluto. So, for all of us, right around 38 degrees or so, we have a Pluto square Pluto. Pluto takes a long time to move through the zodiac. And so, anytime we have some kind of Pluto activation, we feel it for a really long time. And those squares are this tension, right? You've heard me talk about squares, empowering squares from being this kind of like bad energy into this place of lots of creative tension. And really, this has been building up for you for about a year now, since February 2020. And it's supposed to last until November of 2023 for you. Now, this beginning phase, because we're looking at kind of like a 3.5 year um, uh, transformation period with Pluto squaring Pluto at the very beginning, and you're still in the very beginning of it. Things just feel like really hard. You're like at a crisis point of like, oh my gosh, am I going to make it? Am I going to break it? What's going on? And so to acknowledge that part of this stuck feeling with that Pluto squaring Pluto, like Pluto is our inner power of transformation, and it intensifies and it detoxifies. This is really the sense of like self renewal and regeneration. So sometimes these take time. And so anytime there's a Pluto aspect, and I'm not a therapist here, so I do hope that if you need support, you are definitely talking to people who are in the mental health profession. If that's like feeling like everything is getting really overwhelming for you, I urge you to seek that type of help. Because with the Pluto square Pluto, the idea is that we don't run away from the intensity. We don't run away from this like inner turmoil. Instead, we dive deep in it. We dive deep into the unconscious behaviors that we have in our life, right? And as we dive deep into this, we can go into the shadows and bring things up into the light. And in a way, by bringing these things up into light, all of these deep, dark shadows, then this is really healing. Now, know that all of us go through this if we are lucky enough to reach the age of around 38 years old. We all go through this. There are several midlife transits that happen. You are also going through, you really recently passed your Uranus opposite Uranus. That is just kind of your typical midlife crisis. These two aspects come right at the same time. So do know that there is light at the end of the tunnel, although things feel really, 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 really hard for you. And especially because on the other side of your chart, Pluto, who is squaring your natal Pluto at Libra of 26 degrees, is also squaring your natal moon at Aries of 24 degrees. Okay. And so this time, instead of like this deep inner transformation, there's like this emotional toll that's going on. Like anytime Pluto is squaring our emotional center, our feelings, that all those things that the moon represents, and oh my gosh, that really feels intense too from this like emotional place. But knowing that this transit also, again, anytime there's a transit with Pluto, there's this intensity, right? And it happens for a long time. So this started back in February of 2019, and this is going to be going all the way for another year. And so this is this process of emotional transformation. So you asked about this new moon. For this new moon for you, it's going to be happening right at your midheaven, right at the very tippy top point of your chart. And what this means is that, later on when you're doing a new moon intention, you're going to be looking for your 10th house activation. But more importantly than a 10th house activation, this is happening at the highest part of your chart. And so this really talks about your like ultimate purpose and your ultimate mission. And so I'm curious that when you do this new moon ritual and you're looking at what do you want to create in your life? Like, what is your ultimate mission? And for you, your ultimate mission is definitely forward thinking. You have Aquarius at your midheaven. And so thinking about this idea of social justice and inclusion and diversity and technology and innovation and all of these kinds of Aquarian themes, that has a lot to do with your ultimate mission. And so are you working in your ultimate mission? How do you see yourself and your purpose in your ultimate mission? And maybe just kind of, one part of you is diving deep into the shadows, and the other part of you is aiming high and wondering how can you live with both of those pieces? And maybe the focus on what your purpose is and what your life, even if that isn't clear to you, to really start directing in that part of your life and your business. I hope that serves. New Moon in Aquarius is going to happen on February 11th or 12th, depending on where you live on this planet Earth. And it's going to be happening at Aquarius of 23 degrees, where the sun and the moon meet at 23 degrees and 17 minutes. If you want to see a chart of this new moon, head on over to thesavvyluminary.com and you can always take a look at the show notes. And I also have this chart posted in my book, New Moon Rituals for Entrepreneurs, which is now available on Amazon. Well, anyway, this new moon in Aquarius is so significant because we have a stellium. A stellium is just an astrological term for a lot of energies, like three or more planets in one sign. So we have on the new moon, we have the moon and the sun in Aquarius, joined by Mercury retrograde. And Venus and Jupiter and Saturn, right? And really, Jupiter and Venus will be meeting right shortly, right after the new moon. Jupiter and Venus are, our happy planets in our charts. They will be meeting exactly a few hours later. So this is like really an auspicious time. It's gonna feel really, really hopeful. It's gonna feel more hopeful than it has been in a while, even though Mars will be squaring off with Mercury. So, like just, watch your tongue. So even though things can be feeling hopeful, there could still be misunderstandings where, tempers flare, but mostly all the other good energies are going to override the square between Mars and Mercury at that time of the new moon in Aquarius. Now, the last time we had this kind of pileup of Aquarian energies was in 1962. This is about 5 years before the Summer of Love. So back in February 1962, and there was a new moon. It was also an eclipse. And this was like the start of a major cultural shift, right? So if we want to kind of apply those energies to today, what is this new cultural shift that we are bringing into the future? With this new moon in Aquarius, we are, of course, still talking about social impact and innovation, right? Because now it has a new meaning and feel for you, especially since we've been doing all of this deep work with Mercury retrograde, right? So if you've been doing your Mercury retrograde work, you may have already have some insight as to what you have been rethinking and what it all means, right? Don't worry if you haven't yet figured it out or got clarity. I am there with you in the unclear boat. But so you as a spiritual business, you have your own version of innovation, right? Perhaps it's tapping into ancient wisdom or technologies and making it new for modern practitioners, right? I always talk about crystal technology when it comes to this idea of ancient wisdom and making it new again. Or maybe it's the impact you make that is meant to serve less people in more intimate ways versus going big and large in the days of like profiteering past, right? Or maybe it could be even reinventing how you personally take care of Mother Earth and the environment, because that is such a theme for this year that we need to regenerate and we need to take care of our resources. We are at critical mass. right? However, Aquarian ideals show up for you, right? Whether this is social, equitable, environmental impact, you have to bring in your community to help you with these humanitarian ideals, right? Call in your community so that you can bring forth more social justice and more equitable futures, right? So, this new moon, you get a chance to rewrite your story in the way you do business and how your business makes social and environmental impact, right? You feel this need to innovate and you feel this need to call in your greater community because you can't do this alone. On today's new moon, you are going to decide today what groundbreaking social impact you want to make in your spiritual business. So today you will plant the seeds to call in your community to create social impact through your business and brand. Right. All of these things because we have, the moon and the sun, right? Of course, that's like time for planting seeds. Mercury is about rethinking the future, right? Mercury in Aquarius. We have Venus, which is calling in and connecting with people over shared values and larger forward thinking ideas. We have Jupiter in Aquarius that's just blessing and putting all the belief systems in place so that we can actually envision this greater future. And then, of course, we have Saturn, who's still, like, grounding everything and saying, wait, let's make sure our ideas are not too vast. Let's make sure that we can still, commit to these ideas and putting some structures in place for this all, right? So you can see how all of these energies are really impacting this idea of the future that you want to build. So I want you to take a look at your new moon by house, right? You can always customize your new moons. Remember, you can look at the house that is being activated, and I'll go through the house by house. You can look at your natal chart to see what other air planets, because Aquarius is air. So if you have any planets in air signs close to 23 degrees, those planetary energies are going to support you and they want a voice in your new moon ritual. And if you have any planets in the fixed signs, right? So the fixed signs are Leo, Taurus, Scorpio, and Aquarius. If you have any fixed energies around 23 degrees, those energies are going to want a voice and they're going to add some creative tension. Okay, so before we get into the house by house activation, right? Like where this new moon is activating in your chart so you can plant the seeds and like get really intentional of what you want to create in this kind of Aquarius future forward vision for your business. So I'd like to invite you to my upcoming new moon ceremony, new moon in Aquarius, and that's going to be held on the day of the new moon. So here in Pacific Coast, that is on February 11th. Pacific time, the new moon happens at 11:06 a.m. And so if you're really going to be harnessing the energy, you want to do a new moon ritual about 35 minutes. If you're setting your intentions and doing an intention setting ritual, you want to do it about 35 minutes after the new moon. So we're looking around 12:01 noon for people in the Pacific Coast. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be hosting a ceremony at 2 p.m. Pacific or 5 p.m. Eastern on February 11th. Really intimately, we're going to be looking at this new moon in Aquarius, and we're going to be looking at how it integrates with our Mercury retrograde because you can't really separate these two. You really Mercury retrograde are really rethinking all of the Aquarian energies. And then right at that new moon, it's going to be such a wonderful time to plant those energies, right? So during the new moon ceremony, of course, we'll be going through all of the astrology of this particular new moon, but we're going to get really intimate with looking at how the Mercury retrograde and the new moon work together in your business. Of course, I will be offering live readings. I know that's everybody's favorite part of these master classes and ceremonies. So I can prescribe for you everything that's going on, what is really coming through that wants to be planted for this upcoming new moon. I know for me, this new moon is very, very powerful because I have so many planets right around that 23-degree mark. If you look at my chart, I have a grand trine in air signs all at around the 23-degree mark. I have my Jupiter and Sun conjunct in Aquarius at 24 and 25 degrees. I have my Saturn at Gemini and 27 degrees, and I have Uranus at 27 degrees of Libra. So all of those energies are being activated during this new moon in Aquarius. I also have fixed signs. I have Mars at 23 degrees of Taurus. So Mars, my motivation and my drive is going to be squaring off and activating this new moon activation for me as well. So, when I'm thinking about my personal ritual, holy smokes, this one is a huge one for me, and I hope everything goes pretty smoothly. So please join me for this upcoming new moon ceremony. These are so fun. And if you can't make it, of course, there will be a replay. Again, it's pay what you can. If you feel called to join in, don't feel bad. Don't let the money stop you. You can pay as low as $10, but it is a sliding scale with a recommended payment between $47 and $97. So please join us. The ceremonies usually last for about 90 minutes to 2 hours, depending on how many live charts I will read. Head over to thesavvyluminary.com/new moon to sign up and join us on February 11th at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. If you don't have a chance to join us, you can always get my book, New Moon Rituals for Entrepreneurs. It's now available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and it goes through all of the new moons for 2021 and gives you tips on how to customize and personalize each of these new moon rituals so that you can set the intention for your business in 2021. So really quick before we get into the house activations, I wanted to answer a few of the questions that people in my free Facebook group, The Savvy Luminary, have asked. So Brooke was asking, why is this an important and potent new moon? And she heard another astrologer talking about Jupiter crossing over another planet several times this year. Right. So, Brooke, this is definitely an important new moon just because of all of the Aquarian future forward energy. If we can think about that, the example that I mentioned that in 1962, we had this similar stellium right before, 5 years before the Summer of Love, but really being that pivotal point where we were creating a new societal norm, right? People were leaving that time of conformity and really, looking forward about self-expression, right before the civil rights movement really started to take off. And so in this new moon, we have that same kind of energy. And because of Mercury retrograde, Mercury and Jupiter will be playing with each other over the next few months, crisscrossing 3 times. All right. Mercury already crossed Jupiter the first time, and then it's going to cross Jupiter again. And so Mercury is our ability to think and express, and Jupiter just expands things, right? So if you get really clear on what you want during this new moon and you're able to write it down, think about it, and talk about it and express it with others, Jupiter is just going to expand that, right? Jupiter and Venus are 2 planets in our chart that normally anytime they touch things, it just gives it that nice glow up. And so think about this new moon when you get really clear on what you want to plant. Don't get bogged down in the details if you still don't have the details, but what kind of future do you want to create for you in your business, for your communities, for your family? Put that all down into writing and see how Jupiter helps you expand that. Now, Melanie asks, when the new moon hits, should we not only be looking at the house it's in our personal chart, but also the Uranus's placement as well? So great question to ask. So Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius. So Aquarius has a traditional ruler, Saturn, and a modern ruler, Uranus. And so during the new moon, when you're looking at the house activation, right, that's where we look at the house activation because this is where you have the energy available in your business to make this kind of new moon intention. And then we can look at the ruler as to where we want to direct that intention. So for example, you could look at Uranus, but normally when you're using this kind of directing and rulership ability, and for those of you that are, this is a new concept, don't get caught up in it. This is kind of just like the extra frosting on the cake. You don't really need it. But if you want to get even more, drill down more specifically, so Melanie, I would actually even look at Saturn, because this is kind of like a more traditional technique that you're using. So in these cases, we normally look at the traditional ruler. Now, if you want even extra credit, you could also look at Uranus. So for me, for example, just because I don't know your chart, Melanie. So my Aquarius is in the ninth house, and the ruler of Aquarius, when I look at Saturn, is in the first house. Or if I look at Uranus in the fifth house. Now, for me, I'm going to look at Saturn because, again, traditional ruler, and that's the way that I've been trained, and that works for me. And so earlier or later, I'll be sharing with you about the intention that I want to set in that kind of ninth house sphere. But the way that I want to direct it is now through the first house. So, first house about branding and how I show up and how I be more visible. So, my ninth house theme that I'm going to set my intentions around getting more public relations, I'm directing my public relations so that the result will be to expand my brand and my visibility. So that's directing in the first house. So I hope that answers your question. And then Wilda, she says that she has a natal Venus at 19 degrees of Aquarius in the fourth house, and she's creating her first group program on healing using astrology. Ooh, I love it. Now that the stellium is here, how do I use it to shift my mindset to create the business systems that I need to thrive? Well, Wilda, when we go through the house by house activations, I want you to pay special attention to the fourth house. I have met so many powerful business owners with fourth house at the bottom, with Aquarius at the bottom of their chart, meaning that they're really accessing and utilizing their emotional security in just like really innovative ways. Right. And so, to answer your question about shifting your mindset with this stellium, that's probably going to be happening all in your fourth house. This is really not just shifting your mindset, this is shifting your emotional security set. This is getting really comfortable in the idea that you can rely on being an innovator, right? Part of the fourth house is the past, and part of the fourth house is your ancestry and what you came into this world with already knowing how to do. You already came into this world being like coming with a wealth of information, with knowing how to be an innovator, how to be a future forward change making thinker. So your mindset is to really figure out what you need to feel secure. And it's really coming from this aspect of emotional security so that you can just go forth confidently and make those decisions based on the future with faith instead of fear. So let's get into the house activations. House activations during these new moons are probably like the most potent way to use a new moon, or to set a new moon intention, because the house that contains the new moon activation, so in this case, it's Aquarius of 23 degrees, whatever house contains Aquarius of 23 degrees is that area, that part of your business that wants to be up leveled, that wants to have a new intention clarified and reset, right? And so the theme for this new moon activation in Aquarius with Mercury retrograde and all of the stellium, all of the energies in Aquarius, is planting seeds, setting your intentions to call in your larger soul communities. And so when we think about your larger soul communities, this can be your friend networks, it could be your groups, your communities, your larger memberships, your social media platforms and followers, anything where you can think of your larger networks and communities, those platforms, right? So you are going to be planting the seeds to call in your larger communities through your business. Okay. So if 23 degrees of Aquarius happens in your first house, right? This is about your brand awareness and innovative leadership, right? So, really thinking about for this new moon, how you want to use your brand and leadership to call in your larger communities of other innovative leaders. If you have 23 degrees of Aquarius in your second house of values, right? This is going to be calling in your larger communities through equitable and social justice values, right? So The second house is about values, how you add value, and also what you invest in. So the money, right? So we're talking about equitable success. And how do we bring equitable success and empowerment through social justice values in your business? If 23 degrees of Aquarius happens in your third house, this is all about using technology and innovation to call in your soul community through communications, promotions, and shared knowledge. So, thinking about teaching, right? So, how can you innovate in that way? If your 23 degrees of Aquarius happens in the fourth house, ah, this is about emotional groundedness and creating innovative, safe communities or creating safe communities in innovative ways, right? This means that the root of your chart in the fourth house about that kind of baseline emotional security and that connectedness to the past, how you're really innovating this somehow. I see some really powerful people with Aquarius at the base of their chart. And as they, dive into that emotional groundedness, that fourth house is interconnected with your 10th house, your midheaven on delivering on your purpose. And so anytime there's a fourth house, 10th house activation, this is really that idea that I keep on mentioning over root to rise, that we can only be effective in our professional and our public lives if we are rooted in our private and our emotional lives. So that's fourth house Aquarius activation there. If you have Aquarius of 23 degrees happening in your fifth house, you're planting seeds to call in your larger groups and communities through your business's creative joy, pleasure, and purpose, right? So, fifth house, sometimes we look at it traditional astrology about children, but in our business, these are about our creative projects. How are you connecting in innovative ways with your soul groups and friend circles through these kinds of passion projects in your business? If you have Aquarius of 23 degrees activating your sixth house for this new moon, this is about calling your larger communities and platforms through your businesses innovative and smart automations and your ability maybe to delegate and be more effective with bots, right? This is like very future forward service to others using technology, right? I get really excited thinking about the sixth house because sometimes the sixth house goes underrepresented when we think about, like, in business, sixth house meaning about our employees and the people that work for us, right? That's the sixth house, but it's also about service to others and how we can be more effective and more whole in our business. And so, of course, to be effective and whole in our business, we're not working by ourselves. We are working with others. Or if you have sixth house in Aquarius, this is about working with like maybe AIs or bots or, pulling out and dusting up your Zapier automation so that you're not doing everything, working smarter, not harder here. If you have Aquarius activating your seventh house, Aquarius 23 degrees in your seventh house, this is about calling in your larger communities so that you can collaborate with future forward co-creators. Yes, so this is a culmination of where your larger communities intersect with your ideal customers, right? If you have Aquarius on the seventh house, your ideal customers embody this kind of Aquarian ideal. They're humanitarians, they're forward thinking, they love their friend connections, right? So thinking about all of these innovators and how you can collaborate over change making, well, how to co-create with these change makers. If you have Aquarius of 23 degrees in your eighth house, we're talking about calling in your larger community through your business's innovative ways to transform and leverage other people's money. All right. So what does that mean? So eighth house is the house of in traditional astrology, it's about death and taxes. And so we think about it as other people's money or the money of your partners, right? So leveraging loans, maybe from your partners, or leveraging loans from banks, or leveraging debts, leveraging liabilities, right? Those are some business aspects of like the eighth house arena, right? Now, if you're not looking to leverage your debts or liabilities or other people's money, then we're looking at eighth house from this place of death. But death is not necessarily the ending. The death is here means the transformation or the use of mystery. So in modern review of eighth house themes, it's more about like that deep emotional transformation, that therapeutic transformation, or even transformation that happens on the spiritual realm, in the realm of mystery. So, how can you use mystery or mystery schools in innovative ways, right? If you have your Aquarius of 23 degrees in your ninth house, like me, this is about planting the seeds to call in your larger communities and platforms through an expansive vision. I put here journeying work too. Obviously, most of us are not traveling right now, but when we think about journeying, it doesn't even just have to be meaning physical journeying. You know, the ninth house again is about it's about philosophy and teaching and long distance travel. But because we're not doing any long distance travel, this can be like really expanding your philosophy or expanding your mind or expanding your reach through publishing, public relations, and things like that. So when I talk about expanding your innovative vision and journeying work, this is really about reaching a global network to call in your soul community. So I know at least for me in the ninth house, I've already been thinking about the seeds that I want to plant. And I believe that in 2021 is the year of public relations for me. In 2020, I wrote my book and I committed to this podcast. And now I'm really committed to getting this word of innovative branding out to a wider world and making it not on the fringes of business, but actually like a tool that people use to create an authentic brand. That's astrology. So do you see how that works there with the ninth house, bringing in all of those ninth house themes, astrology, visioning, belief, and spreading it across the globe? If you have Aquarius at 23 degrees happening in your 10th house, like Sarah, even though her midheaven is at 24 degrees, the 23-degree activation is really more for Sarah's 10th house. And oh my goodness, for 10th house, this is really about your your ultimate mission, and your ultimate mission being in this kind of ideal of humanitarian work or technology or future forwardness, all of those Aquarius themes that I've been talking now seems like for weeks now. But you're going to be really planting the seeds to call in your soul communities and your platform through this shared humanitarian ultimate mission. If you have Aquarius of 23 degrees in the 11th house, all right, so 11th house is already ruled by Aquarius. So this is really potent for you as well. And so already we're calling in your larger community and platform, but you're now looking for this in terms of like, how are you going to make a greater social impact? Right? This community building and bringing in your friends isn't just for like this, like, like for fun and games. It's actually now to make change in society, to make change in the world. So you have a big job if you have 11th house activation for this new moon to really plant those seeds of what you want to impact in the world. And now if you have 23 degrees of Aquarius happening in the 12th house, 12th house is this house of kind of mystery, of ease and flow. I know this one is the most confusing oftentimes because I'll have like some generic thing about what do you need to reform? What do you need to restore? What do you need to rest and retreat into, right? And so there's this part of when we're calling in our larger communities, like that Aquarius theme in your business, and you have a 12th house Aquarius, this is about using technology and thinking about the future in this place of ease and flow. And thinking about that idea of reform, and if we want to like drill down into that kind of social justice arena, that reform could just mean like what systems need to be reformed, what systems are not working for a certain segment of society. So you can think about your 12th house activation in that sense as well, about reforming social impact through your larger communities in your business. Isn't that great? So anyway, I hope that these resonated with you, and I would love to hear the intentions that you are looking to set for this new moon. Now, if you need help with setting your intentions and need a little bit of clarity, you are totally invited to attend my new moon ceremony happening on February 11th at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, and you can sign up at thesavvyluminary.com/new moon. All right. Thank you so much for joining me in today's episode, right before our next episode, which is our anniversary episode. I would love to include you in an audio collage of how this podcast has impacted you. So please consider leaving me a short message on SpeakPipe, leaving your name and your business name and the experience that you had with this podcast over the last year. And we'll compile everything and share that in our anniversary episode. So to leave us a voice message, head over to SpeakPipe, SpeakPipe.com/the Savvy Luminary. All right. So before we close out, let's just repeat our mantra and close this energy. Thank you so much again for joining me and spending some time listening about the Aquarius new moon and really, facing the future and just seeing yourself as an agent of change. So sit up straight wherever you can, feel your feet plant into the earth and gather in all your energy. Our mantra: I speak my social values through my brand to call in my soul communities. I speak my social values through my brand to call in my soul communities. All right, get out there and tell it to the winds. Tell everybody what you value in society and how you are going to make change so that you can call in your soul community with this upcoming new moon in Aquarius. Until next week for our special anniversary episode. Mahalo for listening to this brand new podcast. If you enjoyed learning about astrology for entrepreneurs, help me spread the word by sharing this podcast with your business besties, and hop over to The Savvy Luminary for links to episode notes and our free Facebook community where you can send me questions about astrology or branding, as well as connect with other like-minded businesses.